Shalom. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center. And today we have as a guest my wife, Clara Simon, who is the president of the Lubavitch Women's Organization of the Capital District. And today we will talk and discuss about the role of the Jewish woman in society, in the home, and in the community. Clara, the first question I'd like to ask, and I think that many people have the perspective of the Jewish woman as being a second-class citizen, as somebody who is oppressed, who stays in the home, and has a very secondary role in Jewish life. And the first thing we'd like to ask is a historical perspective of how does Judaism view the role of the Jewish woman? Well,
as you said, I think you are correct in assessing the current view. To a great extent, people are very uninformed about the traditional role of the woman in Jewish history and Judaism in general. And unfortunately, Jewish women have gotten a bad rap, so to speak. In reality, nothing could be further than the truth. Judaism has always esteemed and valued women very, very highly. And you mentioned Jewish history. One can really point to various figures during the course of all of Jewish history to highlight the point that I'm trying to make, that women, contrary to being second fiddle or second best, have played a very primary role of importance from early times, thousands of years ago, to the present day. If you want to look at the Bible, starting with the Bible, we have the matriarch Sarah, who everyone knows, Abraham and Sarah. And there's a very beautiful part of the Bible where Abraham is commanded by God to send away his firstborn son, Ishmael. And Sarah asks him to do that, and Abraham is very, very reluctant. He doesn't want to do it. And when he questions God, God answers Abraham, and he says, everything that Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. And there, Rashi, who was a very famous commentator, he lived in the year 1000 in France, and he's our main commentator on the Bible now. He quotes there that Sarah was superior to Abraham in prophecy. That's a fairly minor example. Of course, more major women who come to mind are Esther of the Purim story. Purim is going to be coming up in about a month and a half. And, of course, we know the story of Judith. We've heard of her during the story of Hanukkah. Many may have perhaps heard of Deborah, the judge, who led the Jewish army to victory and was certainly in the forefront and not behind the scenes at all. So these are just briefly mentioning throughout. Of course, we have in our present, we have times in Italy, there were women who led houses of banking. They were very prominent in commerce roles. And, of course, we have Golda Meir in Israel being the prime minister, so that one can see these are the major, more outstanding examples that highlight the fact that women have never been second-class citizens, and not only not in the home and in a private type of a life, but they've actually been considered as being worthy of leading the Jewish people as a whole at very prominent times of Jewish history.
I see that in historically that there is women's leadership role, but on the other hand, we do see there is an emphasis in Judaism about the Jewish home. And of course, the woman physically is the mother of children. She is the bearer of the children, that has to be the major educator of the child in the home. And there is an emphasis on this in Judaism, of course, the idea of having children, the idea of educating children. In today's society, though, that in itself may be considered, like I would say, second-class citizen and oppression. The woman should be liberated just to have a career, people would tell you. Having children, staying at home with the children, educating children is not a superior role. How would you answer that?
I would beg to differ a little bit with that. I think that as one looks at the course of the women's movement in the past, I don't know exactly, 20 years, there was a very strong emphasis, perhaps 20, 15 years ago, that women should be free to do more than just, in quotation marks, have children. And a lot of emphasis was placed on that, and we see today that there are definitely, women telephone repair people and women anchor people on the television and so on. But I think that the emphasis has swung from that being the only meaningful activity, what a woman does professionally in her career, to finding women who have careers and have professions but also find the family very important. And a lot of women now are starting out with careers, and then as they're having children, 1 or 2 children, they're quite confidently taking time off and devoting it to their children and their family again. And this is, we see this in the secular environment, but I think it only serves to underscore and emphasize something that people know naturally by themselves, just with common sense, that children are the future of the world. If we don't have children, that there's no next generation, there's no one to give over everything that we've striven for. So Judaism, definitely, you are correct in saying it places a very strong emphasis on the home as being the central arena of Jewish religion and Jewish, as you said, education and transmission of values from generation to generation. Of course, interestingly enough, there's some laws that serve to emphasize this again, that the home in Judaism is considered of paramount importance, even more so than the synagogue. It's told that if a synagogue only has limited resources, enough either to own a Torah scroll, which, as most people know, is central to Jewish religious rituals. It's read on the Sabbath and on holidays. If they only have enough money for that, or to build a mikvah, a ritual pool of water, which the married woman immerses herself once a month, then the synagogue is adjoined to sell their Torah scroll, to go without a Torah scroll, not to have a reading of the Torah for the whole year, in order to build a mikvah where the woman goes very privately. Nobody knows about that. It's a very private commandment, but it's central importance to the Jewish family life. And this is more important. It's considered more important what happens in the private arena of the home than what happens in the synagogue. So you are correct in saying that the home is really of very great importance, and that's perhaps why the woman is not stigmatized in any way as being only at home or just at home. I would like to mention, though, that there is nothing in Judaism that says a woman is not allowed to work outside of the home. And the Talmud, which is the code of Jewish law from thousands of years ago, was perhaps more liberated in the laws that they had regarding women than many civil laws. For instance, it is said that a woman, if she does work outside of the home, her earnings are totally within her own jurisdiction. She may, if she wants, help with the household expenses. She may help her husband provide the food and the clothing and so on, but she does not have to. What she earns is hers alone. She has private property and total power over her earnings, which until, I believe, even the 1800s in England was not so. Until the 1800s, a woman herself was considered property of the husband, let alone anything that she might have earned. So this, it's really an illusion. It's not an accurate view to think that the Jewish woman is only supposed to be at home and not allowed to act in the public arena at all. On the contrary, when the duties of a wife and mother are considered very, very important, and the woman the best able perhaps to fulfill that nurturing of very young children. But if she can combine this successfully with a career outside of the home, more the power to her. Let her do it.
I think that's important to understand, that you can have everything really in Judaism. You can have the home and the education of the children, which in today's society really is a problem. People are looking for, we have on the bumper stickers, hugs are better than drugs. There's such a problem out there in society where the children do not feel a place in the home, maybe because of the high rate of divorce, and maybe because, like you say, a loving, nurturing home where both the parents are out working, and you have these lucky children that come home to an empty house. But you see that that Judaism has survived 3,300 years, and like you say, the next generation is not going to continue unless you have the children. Something has to be eternal, and I think that's important in the education of the home. But together with that, I think that there's importance where, like I said before, you are the president of the Lubavitch Women's Organization, and maybe tell us a little about that, where it's not just, like you say, there's a privacy in the home, there's a privacy in caring for your own children, but there's also, the Lubavitch Women's Organization is an outreach program to other women, to other children.
Yes, I will comment on that. I'd like to backtrack just a minute and mention that the observance of Shabbat, the Sabbath, is perhaps very important in pulling all the loose ends together. When you do, in this day and age, have both parents working, or at least one part-time, that when you have an Orthodox observance of Shabbat where pretty much everything stops except for family activity, inviting guests, and a beautiful meal on Friday night, and candles lit, and so on. It's a day devoted to study of the Torah and, as we said, inviting guests. That itself makes a haven in a very busy and hectic world. It's a time when the children can be heard as to what they've learned in school, and when husband and wife and family have nothing else to do but to be together for that one day. So I think that in itself will protect and enhance a good family relationship, whereas we said there are people, so many activities going on throughout the week. You mentioned, and correctly so, that we as Jewish Orthodox women, Lubavitch women in particular, feel very strongly that although these things are very important, family and so on, it's not enough just to be whole in your own family. But there's now Judaism and Jewry in general is going through a terrible crisis of assimilation, intermarriage, children that no longer know very much about Judaism or care very much. So that we as women, of course men and children also, but because I'm a woman, that's what I see the most, we as women have a responsibility to reach out to other people, to educate primarily. We're not interested in converting, quote unquote, or doing the hard sell, but there are many women that very gratefully take the free Sabbath candlesticks that we offer, or are interested in learning some of the traditional foods, or coming to a lecture on topics of Jewish women's interests, so that we very much try to make programs throughout the year that will interest contemporary Jewish women and lead them into an awareness and appreciation of the Jewish heritage. And we try and do this in whichever way we can.
Is it another thing which we were talking about, the role of the Jewish woman in Judaism itself, and I, again, being the devil's advocate, if you can excuse the expression, trying to bring out some of the arguments that people have that they see that something's wrong with the Jewish woman, is again the synagogue. You mentioned before that the synagogue is less important than the mikveh, even though I'm sure that most people consider the synagogue as the prime Jewish area, and a mikveh is almost unneeded in most communities, and we see a different perspective in that case. But even in the mitzvahs, in the certain commandments, people know that the men are in the synagogue, they're wearing the prayer shawls, the talesim, they're wearing the phylacteries, the tefillin, and again the women are going to say, hey, that means that we're a secondary role, and if you say this is serving God and servants in Judaism, maybe we see that there are some other ideas and mitzvahs that women are more prevalent, or in certain cases they have the choice over the men.
It's a good point. It's a very much a visible difference between Jewish men's roles and women's roles. It ties in to a lot of different things. First of all, I would say that although, as we said, the value judgment on the worth of a Jewish man and a Jewish woman is equal, if, as I sometimes say, I think perhaps Jewish women are valued even more than Jewish men, and the Torah was offered to them before the Jewish men, and so on. There are certain historical things to back that up. But there's definitely a feeling that there are different, that men should operate in one arena and women in another. And a lot of times those areas overlap, and other times they're quite different. A beautiful example that's given is that of the human body, that there are different organs in the human body, a heart and a liver, lungs, and so on, and they are each very crucial to the functioning and health of the whole organism. If the heart cells would all of a sudden say, hey, wait a minute, there's not so much prestige, or maybe vice versa, the lungs cells would say there's not as much prestige in being a lung cell as there is in a heart cell, I want to pump the blood, and then they would change their function to pumping blood, you know, everything would break, mayhem would break loose, and the body would get very ill and not function as a whole. And this is an example that's given to the Jewish people, that there are men, there are women, there are children, and each, when they're functioning, they should have different functions. And when they're functioning to the best of their ability and potential, the whole organism, the whole Jewish people functions well and is healthy. And there's no less prestige involved in being a heart cell, being a Jewish man or a Jewish woman or a Jewish child or whatever it might be, that each has unique capabilities and unique roles, and when they do that, that's the best. Now, when you're coming to the synagogue, and it's very obvious that there is a mechitza, or a separation between the men's section of the synagogue and the women's section of the synagogue, some people take great offense, and they find it very difficult to deal with. I personally never found it so difficult. I was not brought up in an observant home, and when I came into I had been brought up in, you know, I wasn't even affiliated with even a Reformed temple, and we went to temple at times, you know, it was everyone please rise, everyone please sit, and so on. When I came to the Orthodox synagogue, the Lubavitch synagogue, for the first time, I was very impressed with the fact that there wasn't so much praying in unison. Some people were out of sync with one another, but it highlighted the idea that the main communication taking place in synagogue was supposed to be between the individual and God. It was a one-on-one relationship, and it did not matter so much what everyone around one was doing. And I think if that is the case, then it doesn't matter so much whether it's men that sit mingled with women or separate from women. And the way to best do it is whatever method facilitates most easily that human being God connection. And it could very well be, and you know, in a way I appreciated always being alone with the women, where I could pray in whichever manner I felt fit without having to worry that people were looking at me or what might be. It also, you mentioned the women not having a tallis, a prayer shawl, or to fill in other things like that, or not in the Orthodox tradition being allowed to be rabbis and so on. And this ties in with a whole different area, which again it's hard to touch on briefly, but I'll try it. Jewish culture predates and precedes American culture by a long, long time. A lot of the values that we live with today are very definitely secular values that come from American Western culture. American culture, there is a great value and emphasis placed on fame, on notoriety, having your name up in neon lights. That's why the sports figures are so famous and acclaimed, and movie stars are so famous because they've made it. If you want to know if someone is successful, you think about how much money he makes. Does he make a lot of money? Judaism values success in a very, very different manner. It's a much more private way, and if a person is successful, man or woman, generally one would think is, how is his family life? Is he a decent human being? Is he generous and kind to those he meets around him, he or she meets in the world around him? And that is a measure of a person's success. So that the idea of being up on the stage and doing the main thing is not necessarily the greatest thing to do or to be in Judaism. So that when we see the rabbi is on the bima, is on the stage, and he has the prayer shawl and he is making the speech, okay, but it's not such great shakes. One can have a synagogue without a rabbi. One can have a synagogue and prayers without a minyan, a quorum of 10 men. And again, really, the main arena of Jewish tradition and transmission of values is found in the home. So that although the woman's role may not be so public, it does not mean it isn't valued and equally as important, perhaps much more crucial to Jewish life in general than that of the public figures.
I say even in the mitzvahs itself, in the different commandments, as we mentioned, all right, the men do have the phylacteries, they have the talesim, which are important in its own right. But again, the Jewish woman, for example, talk about Shabbos candles, the Friday night candles, or kosher, for example, where the women are entrusted with these special mitzvahs, these commandments. And really, it's not that, well, here's some mitzvahs, some commandments for men, and here's some mitzvahs, commandments for the women. And all right, they have different jobs, but really here's a few instances where the men and women are equal, so to speak. If, for example, a man is living by himself, so he's a bachelor, for example, then he does have to light the Shabbos candle. Some people don't know about it. They just think that the candle is for women. The truth is that if a person is living by himself and he's having Friday night by himself, Shabbos, then he really should light the candles. But let's say then the man becomes married, so now there's a man and a woman. Should they both light the candles? Well, of course, no. That people, we all know that it's the Jewish women and also the little girls that light the candles. So there is an importance there that, like you say, especially because there is in the home, and then we could just, like you say, people can argue what's more important, the home life, where maybe your name is not in neon lights. This is your home, and then you don't get a business card, or for example, to have a nice home. On the other hand, if you're a vice president, or if you're a lawyer, or whatever have you, you got your own desk and office, and maybe your own secretary, and that seems to be more important. But it's like you say, I think it's a very much different value system. But in Judaism, you do see that, like I say, there are different roles, but they're equal. And like you say, in many instances, the woman is superior, like I said, in the Shabbos candles and kosher and examples like that.
It's interesting, actually, that, as you said, it's the choice is either the man or the woman to have this mitzvah, this opportunity to serve God. And the woman is entrusted with that. It wouldn't have to be, but she was given the privilege of lighting the candles, of making sure of the kosher in the home, and, as we said, the laws of family purity. And parenthetically, her opinion or her witness is to be totally trusted in all these areas. If there's a question of Jewish law, she alone can say that she's seen something, or in terms of kosher in the kitchen, and she is totally trusted. She doesn't have to call in her husband or any man to back up what she's saying. Again, I think that Judaism just emphasizes that an individual has to try and be whole within themselves. Obviously, there are people nowadays who are single or, are divorced. That doesn't mean there's no place for them in Judaism. There surely is. It's always sort of the focus I like to think of. There's an individual focus, how one is within oneself. And then as one relations to family, which can mean parents and siblings as well as spouse and children. And finally, one's privilege and responsibility in relating to the community as a whole. And there's certainly enough to do for everyone, whether they're women or, as I said before, men or children or whatever age you are. There's a lot to be done, a lot to be learned, and it's really very exciting the more one delves into Jewish life.
It's interesting. I know that, of course, the Lubavitch Women's Organization, Lubavitch is a Hasidic group based in New York, and it's actually tremendously interesting to me that they get together for conventions, and they have literally thousands of women around the world internationally that come together and discuss these different issues. And it seems that the high level of the woman actually, it says, the Rebbe, the Hasidic leader of the Lubavitch movement, actually says that women really have even a greater role, not only in the home now, and that's what we've been discussing, but actually in the community that can influence other people, maybe because they are more warm, and maybe because people are looking simply for a home life. Like we started saying, that there's high rate of divorce, there's even if people have parents, there's not that much concern. There's even other people, it's not a Jewish idea, it's the sociologist has been saying that that's a high rate of drugs. People are looking for it, and there's a need somewhere. They're not happy with their own lives, and it starts in the family life. And these are commercials that I say that's not anything to do with Judaism, but they're just saying a strong family life, this is what you hear, is the way to prevent the drug abuse. And it's amazing that it's nothing amazing to Judaism, of course, but it's just that I think everybody is realizing that if you want good human beings, maybe if you need them to make more money, you could send them to college, but money isn't everything. You have to have people fulfilled and satisfied with themselves, and it really, like, it's what we're saying is the most basic society problems, and I think people would even argue that one of the major problems today in America is the drug abuse, and it's just like maybe divorce rate, and it's all centered, really, we can say the national problems today are centered from the home and then against the Jewish woman. So at a very big society viewpoint, a national viewpoint, it's really the solution is maybe the Jewish woman, or the woman could be an example to what society's values really should be.
I agree with you. I think in general, Jewish families traditionally always were very strong, and typical things like alcoholism were lower found in the Jewish community than elsewhere. I think unfortunately people thought that a good family life or secure family life, these were things that would come naturally. They weren't things that one had to really focus one's attention on, that if one wanted to educate one's children, it should be in a trade, it should be college, it should be medical school, and so on, and that these other things like a happy marriage and respect between the generations, they would come automatically. And unfortunately, I don't think that that is the case. And that really a lot of the laws, there are 613 commandments, but a lot of these commandments are not so much for what they do for God, but what they do for us as human beings. And that when we follow the laws of family purity, they enhance the marriage. When one, as I said before, follows the law of the Shabbat, when one doesn't drive or go shopping or whatever, which on the one hand seems rather restrictive, on the other it ends up having a very beneficial effect, that the family does sit around the dinner table together at least once a week. There is discussion between the generations. What have you learned? What are you doing? That these things do help human existence. It seems perhaps a little contrived to say that a religious law, would do that, but just from personal experience and having lived, as I said, in both ways, I think that it really does. I also it's a tall order to say that Jewish women are capable of fixing all the ills of society, but women are called the Akeret HaBayit, the main foundation of the home, the bearing wall, if you would have it, and that if she manages, she has a special strength to not only make sure that her life goes well, but yes, to have an influence on those around her. And again, I don't think we have to confine ourselves to the immediate family, but we can broaden the walls and look to society. And I think, obviously it's a big thing, as I said before, and how do you do it? You have to go slowly and little by little, and little things do add up. And I guess I do agree with you, but it does mean work. It doesn't come automatically.
I think that we can conclude, maybe if you have a final message to any Jewish women or girls that they want to take a different perspective and see something different, what Judaism says, and it is, as you've been saying, a different perspective than maybe people have been raised up with in America, to say the least. But it's maybe a better one if people are open-minded enough to see that there's something happening in traditional classic Jewish values that they haven't been grown up with, and they see maybe a lack in their own lives that would be fulfilled in Judaism. So maybe you have a little message for them.
We're always open. We would love people to come and visit, or as I said, anyone that's interested in following this discussion further, or coming to learn how to make the traditional holiday foods, or anything, we're free and open to questions and classes. We've spoken in various sisterhood groups and are open to that. So for sure, anyone should feel free to call.
Thank you very much, Clara.